All right, good evening. Welcome to Thursday, November 14th, Grand Blanc Township Board of Trustees meeting. And we have a special guest with us, one of our former township trustees for a long time and served on many committees. And I'd like to ask Mr. Clark Kent to lead us in the pledge. Come on up forward.
His hall.
This is the Clark Kent Hall.
It's the Clark Kent Hall.
And, yeah, Clark Kent Hall. So welcome back, Clark.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, I would like to call our meeting to order, and I would like to ask for an approval of both the consent agenda and our regular agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Support.
Any discussion? I'm not sure, we may have an executive session at the end as well. We'll see where we're at on that. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, with that, we're going to move to public comments, and we ask that keep public comments to 3 minutes or less. Good evening. Per person, or if you have somebody designated, to speak for the group, we can do that as well. But we don't necessarily comment on public comment, but we definitely want to hear from everybody that's here, no matter what your concern. So we'll start here on the left side of the room, in the front row. Anybody in the front row wish to speak? We'll move our way back. Anybody in the front row? Second. Oh, you're going to speak for us? Okay. Good evening.
Good evening to you.
Remind him I need his name and his address.
We need anybody that speaks too, we need your name and address, please.
James Robert Corson. I live on 6386 Prairie Dunes Drive, and I'm in the Grand Reserve subdivision. As you can see, we have a significant group here tonight. These mostly are residents of Grand Reserve. You have been talking in the past with other members of our boards who have presented to you some proposals for our need to disconnect from your water system to the extent that we can use our own water to irrigate some of our properties. I think you've spoken with Bob Emick recently at the last meeting. I'm a director of the Master Board at Grand Reserve. There are 5 people on the Master Board, and we have 2 other boards. Pardon me, I'm a little bit nervous.
No problem, take your time.
We have Al Johnson here tonight, who is president of our condo board, and he's also vice president of the Master Board.
Okay.
We have Bob Emick here, who is the president of our Towns Board, and I'm a director of one of the directors on the Master Board. So I'll just read to you
Sure.
what we have to say. The purpose of our attendance is to express the community's desire to disconnect from the township water source and use our wells for irrigation-only purposes. In an effort to stay consistent with the message that Jim Rabine has presented to the board previously, the Irrigation Subcommittee has drafted a group of talking points that will support the already stated purpose, and those are the talking points I'll present. To be good stewards of the limited water resources, we should not be using potable water for irrigation. Grand Reserve homeowners are being negatively impacted by the per resident monthly costs to irrigate our parks and green spaces. The site was constructed with and currently has 4 wells that provide water to our ponds that could be used for irrigation. These wells were approved by the Township Board. Our proposed solution completely isolates the township water supply from the wells and irrigation system. The resident homes would still be using the township water source, and we are only asking to have the irrigation system be disconnected to the township water source. That's what we have to say. And we have a significant showing of people here tonight to prove to you that, you know, we all want this in our development. Any questions?
No. I think, you know, one of the things that I'll just say is that right now we actually are doing a rate study. Our township is, we've actually hired, and I think Mr. Rabine even mentioned that they're probably the top firm in the country for doing that study and looking at our water system and what costs we have to recover and the whole shebang. So we're looking at all that right now. So your comments are timely, and we will definitely pass those on to the group that is studying that, okay?
Well, we've heard you had other expansion projects coming up in the township in our area. And we're hoping that that helps you with your cost
Definitely.
problem.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And we know that, you know, we see how many people are here and that you're sincere, and we take you as being very sincere. So
We'll be back if we need to be, and we'll cover your back and you cover ours.
Okay. Well, and you know, and we appreciate, you know, your concerns. So anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Please come to the microphone, give us your name and address, and we ask that everybody keep their comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Tara Blanc, 6173 Muirfield Drive, Grand Blanc, in Grand Reserve. I just have a question. I did not understand from the newspaper article, it indicated that you had all, or somebody on the board, had replied that if we disconnected, our water wouldn't be safe to drink. So I don't know if I should be drinking the water because we're all now disconnected.
Yeah.
I mean, for watering the
Yeah.
lawns.
None of us are water experts here on the board, and we don't have any staff here that works in that department, so I couldn't comment. I don't think any of our board
Well,
members said
I
that,
didn't
but
know who had made,
I think it may have been said that down the road, you know, if we had lots of disconnections, that could be the case, but I really don't
yeah, I
want to speak
didn't
for the water department.
understand how that would be
Yeah.
possible.
What I would say is if you have questions of that nature, that you would call our DPW department and ask for Jeff Sears, our director, and speak with him about that question. But he's unfortunately at a conference today.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thanks.
Let's talk Al into it.
John Palmer, 6239 Muirfield Drive, Grand Blanc, part of Grand Reserve.
Good evening.
My question, and I don't know if you can address it now or address it later, is when I read the statute, I did not see anything that specifically said we could not disconnect. And I don't know what basis you're, at least my understanding is you told our leaders that we can't disconnect, and I'd like a specific what it is that you're basing that on.
Let's get through all the questions and we'll see if our attorney can reply to any of those. But I think what we want to do is get all the public comment, and we aren't prepared necessarily to have a separate agenda item tonight on this. Let's continue on the left side here and move back. Anybody on the left side wish to speak? Okay, we'll go right over here and then we'll move over to the right side.
Good evening.
Good
I'm
evening.
here for the district historic district commission, so it's totally off what everybody else is here for. But my name is Debbie Honay, and I'm the chairperson of the Grand Blanc Township Historic District Commission. And I wanted to take the opportunity to thank everybody who showed up on October 5th at our Perry Pioneer Day, and especially for the unveiling of the historic marker. That was 10 years in the working, so we're really pleased with that. Community came out in droves. We had at least over 200 people, which is double any amount that we've ever had in the past. So I'm really grateful for all that. We got our next meeting coming up on Monday. We're going to take a look at our priority list that we had presented to the board, and one of the items on there has been taken care of is the historic marker. The other thing that we've been doing is the month of October, we've had over 125 second graders tour the Perry House, And between myself and Maria Brown from the zoning department, as well as Don Simons, we took an hour and a half with each group of kids to talk about the local history and specifically about the Perry House. So that was a great turnout also, and we're real pleased to be able to do that and check something else off on our priority list. So anybody have any questions for the commission?
I think our board wants to thank you and the rest of the commission for your great work there. I think, the mission of educating young people and everybody really on the history of Grand Blanc Township, through the use of the Perry House and the property there with the reenactments, what have you, I think is phenomenal. So.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Now we just have to figure out the parking situation.
That's
and,
right. That may be our next priority on our list there.
So
to deal with
it's
the
great
parking.
we're getting crowds there,
Yeah.
but we may have to start busing people there.
Right, yep.
So, no, great job
Right.
to all of
Thank
you
you very
for it.
much.
Please pass that along.
Thank you.
Debbie,
Yes.
special thanks to your husband for the outstanding, beautiful work he did out there. It just blows me
Thank you.
away. And thanks for picking up the mantle from the last board and moving it forward. You really changed the goalposts for us.
Thank you.
And just keep up the great work.
Great.
I think you're
I
a great
appreciate that.
citizen and a great volunteer.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I
Thanks.
appreciate that. Yep. Our next Perry Pioneer Day is going to be May 9th on a Saturday, and we're actually going to do a birthday party for Isabella Perry, who was the first non-Native American white child born in Genesee County. Was born there at that house 192 years ago. So we will have a 192nd birthday party for her. So you guys come on out, everybody come on out and see what we've got to offer. Thank you so much for your kind comments. I appreciate
Okay.
that.
Thank you,
All right.
Debbie.
Yep, good night.
Anybody else on the left side? Yes, sir.
Support him if you made the motion.
Good evening. My name is Mike Thompson, and I live at 9337 Pebble Beach Lane in Grand Reserve. And I've only lived there about a year and a half, so I'm not real familiar with what happened in the very beginning. But my question for the board is, going way back to when Pulte first proposed to the township about creating this, what discussions were involved regarding the water? Whose decision was it? Was it Pulte's decision to use potable water to do the landscaping? What was the impetus for that? Because I really don't know, and I don't know if a lot of other people do. So that's my question.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
What we'll probably do is we'll make a note of the questions that you have, and we can communicate through, your board or what have you on the answers for those, because I'm not sure that we're prepared this evening to answer some of those historic questions, what have you. Okay, anybody else on the left side of the room? Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Appreciate you letting me talk here.
Hey, we want to hear from everybody.
Good. Dave Brown, 9440 St. Andrews Drive at Grand Reserve. Just to follow up to what John said when he was up here, I guess your attorney is here? Oh, there we go. Hi, Dave. How are you? Hey, on the spot. I am curious. I have been told, I haven't, through the grapevine, that we can't rely on the website's statements under frequently asked questions. You have a section on water on there, and it says point blank, it says, very specifically says, I may, as a user of the water, may install an irrigation well for watering lawns and flower beds. And I've been told that the board won't, is this the board, is that the right word?
Yeah.
The committee or whatever, doesn't rely on that to make their decisions because somehow, I guess it's not an ordinance, I suppose.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And again, I know we're taking comments tonight, and then we're going to, and what I'm doing is I'm making a note of all your questions and your issues. And I'm happy to take, I'm adding that to our list among some of the other legal and also resource questions. So I'm happy to answer that. I don't know if you want to sit around and listen to me answer that tonight, but I'm happy to provide the answer to that question And again, we've got our DPW department study, this is an ongoing issue for us, and we've got ongoing study happening that happens to be parallel with our rate study. And so, ask your questions. We probably won't be answering them tonight, but we're going to get an answer to all of them. And so I got that one down.
All right.
What's next?
Also on that website, it says, in reference to disconnecting, the website says that only if a home is connected to the township water, it may not be disconnected to drill a new well. So of course our wells, when I had my house built in 2016, those wells were present, I think, for almost 10 years. So we're not drilling any new well, we're relying on an existing well. When I bought my house, it was there, apparently because Pulte had wrong information. Again, I wasn't at these 10 years ago. They decided that even though they attached, I guess, 4 houses to the well system, they were told, somebody in here, DPW or something, that they couldn't use the well water any longer, even though they're currently watering some lawns with the well water. So I guess the point being, in my mind, there's no question that irrigating with wells is allowed. It's only a question of whether how you apply the ordinance, which I still can't find in the ordinance because the new section doesn't have that paragraph C in there that says you can't disconnect once you get in. Am I reading that wrong? Because the old ones had that section C on it. The new one doesn't have a section C on it addressing this issue.
Well, and some of the confusion happens whenever we're amending these ordinances, and they start out as sort of there's a comprehensive master ordinance, and then we're always making these amendments to them, and they come in pieces, and sometimes it's hard to lay them out, and it's like a puzzle almost, and put them together. So if you can't find something on the website, I'm not necessarily surprised, but we are happy to provide the full sequence of these ordinances so you can review them and follow through.
And I think that'd be very helpful to us if the committee would lay out in writing what you're relying on, because I was asking the folks who dealt with you in the past, and they said, well, we got a couple emails, and that's all we've ever had in writing, laying out your position. And I noticed the letter that was sent to you guys, it had language like, it appears, and I think, and as opposed to saying, it is your position that, you know, and it makes it very difficult to respond to that.
No, I'm happy to provide that.
Great, okay. Very good, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the left side wish to comment? With that, we'll move to the front over here. Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Dan McShane, 6208 Marion Lane, also in the Grand Reserve. And as you, I'm sure, are aware, we've totally built out now. We've taken over from Pulte. We have the board that makes the decisions, our homeowners. 400 plus units. Two questions I have. When is the survey report that you have talked about expected to come back to you, so that you people can review and then perhaps let us know? And then the second question would be, do you have a timetable for the board to resolve this issue so that we can have members present to show up?
Yeah, I think that the rate study is just getting started, but we'll reply to that as well. We'll find out the timeline and get you that in the response.
Okay, and then after that is when you'll resolve the issue.
We'll take a look at, we're ongoing looking at it.
Yeah, I think it's ongoing, and they're kind of running on a parallel path. So I don't necessarily think that we need the rate study to be entirely completed before we study this issue and get into our deliberation.
Can I get a rough timeline of 2020 or 2021 or?
Oh, boy, I hope it's not longer than 60 or 90 days. I hope we get this thing.
Thank you. That's kind of a time frame we were.
Okay, anybody else in the front row? Yes, sir.
Bob, I think 9424 St. Andrews Drive. It's good to see you all again.
Yeah, good evening.
I just want to give the board some background into what is happening here beyond the water issues. As I think I mentioned last month, our developers pulled out, and with them went to $300,000 or so that they were contributing to our operating costs every year to keep the HOA fees low. Now, I'm sure Mr. Corse and Mr. Johnson can attest to the fact that we are struggling to try and offset that loss without trying to raise the fees too much for our residents. It's gone up about 7% this year, and we're trying to avoid having to do that year after year.
The fees have gone up 7%?
HOA fees went up about 7% this year, right. And that's still with partial Pulte subsidy and it's going totally away next year. Another factor is that in some homes that have gone up for sale recently, some potential buyers have asked for a cut in the price of the home to offset any potential increase in HOA fees. So we're seeing a loss in home value because of this threat of increased fees. So again, as boards, we're trying to offset that and to mitigate some of those increases. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that background. Yes, sir. We'll go to the second row and
Yeah, Morgan Frederickson, and I know you already know where I'm from. 6522 Prairie Dunes Drive. I'm going to ask this board to consider some conservation when you're considering this issue. Let's not talk about money. Let's talk about conservation, and then let's talk about my blood pressure, because every time that I come out to the garbage and I got my recycle thing there, and I'm watching my sprinkler on my lawn, my blood pressure goes up. So consider conversation or conservation, please. Thank you.
okay. Anybody else in the second row? How about the third row? Anybody like to speak? Fourth row? Yes, sir. Come on up. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Cliff Quanvig. I'm from 9099 Pine Valley Drive. Guess where? The question that I would have, I don't have comment except to say that I think the issue is very important to all of us, as can be attested by the attendance. The two questions that I have is what are in the study, what would be the issues that this board would be primarily concerned about? And could they be specified in such a way that we could also be concerned about the same issues, and so that we would have something in common? And then the second part of that is, I don't know how you commission the people that are doing the study. I'm sure that's probably a contract issue and the like. But if there's any way that the Grand Reserve could be a part of the input to that study, or even a participant in the conducting of the study, I think that would be of great interest to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're getting some great questions, so we appreciate hearing from everybody. Anybody else on this side? How about along the wall here? Anybody in the back along the wall? Mr. Ert, any comment?
Oh, it's nice to see a full house here. Sit here by myself.
Since we have a full house, I just want to take a moment to let you know that Mr. Ert is probably one of our most active citizens in our township. I don't know that he's missed a meeting in the last 4 years at least. But Mr. Ert is very active in the community and attends every one of our board meetings. So he deserves a round of applause from this crowd.
And he lives on Porter Road.
Yeah. Were you looking for a place in Del Webb by chance?
No, he just bought 2 new blankets at Kohl's.
Okay, so any other public comment? I'll close public comment, but sincerely, we appreciate having residents come and give their feedback and questions, because it lets us know, what your concerns are, and we know that, costs are increasing for everybody, and if there's a way to alleviate any costs, we're all about that. And I think you'll see that our board acts very fiscally responsible, and when it comes to spending other people's money, that's the priority. So we will take all of your questions and concerns into consideration. We will make note of every one of them, and we will respond back probably through your board fairly soon, and then we'll keep you posted on the study. I think we probably definitely take some input from Del Webb and any other resident when we do our study. I think a lot of the study work is actually number crunching, but the firm that we're using, in fact, I think your own people noted that they're some of the top in the country to do this. So
When will you reply back to our board?
I think probably in the next week we can probably get back, right, Mr. Laddie?
I think so. What it will take is to convene Potter Consulting and then Jeff Sears and any necessary water techs. I'm happy to be available for it as well, and then
Okay.
we'll probably involve you, and then we'll get something put together. If it isn't exactly on that time frame, it should be very close to that.
Yeah. All right, with that, we're closing public comment, and everybody's welcome to stick around and hear us do business. Yeah, if you don't want to stick around, you know, we're going to be disappointed, but we can live with it.
I'd like to make a motion.
I don't know if Dancing with the Stars is on tonight, or, you know. With that, we're going to go ahead and continue
Hi, neighbor.
with our meeting.
I am fine. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to continue on with our meeting, and at this time, we're going to ask for approval of the minutes, either individually or as a whole.
I'd like
Mr. Thomas?
to make a motion that we approve the minutes as a whole.
Support. For October 8th, October 10th, the executive session for October 10th, the regular meeting for October 22nd, and the executive session for October 22nd, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that's been supported?
By Mr. Mills.
Okay, all's in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Our consent agenda, we've approved the treasurer's financial activity recap, and we've also approved a contract with Gray's Tree Service. Under our operational issues, the board will consider a resolution to authorize the issuance of the special assessment bonds for Green Valley subdivision. We covered this pretty thoroughly in the past. Their paving project has been completed. The final bills have been received. Mr. Guzak has completed all the bonding requirements, and now we're ready to move forward, right?
Right. And I'd like to mention that Green Valley subdivision, I'd like to thank State Bank, the State Bank out of Fenton, because they won the lowest bid and helped them for supporting our residents. Another thing that they did is, one of the items that are on the fees is the bank council fee, which is $3,500, and State Bank did not require that, so that saved the residents an additional $3,500. There was also a bond paying agent of $500, and they've allowed me to be the bond paying agent for them, so that saved the residents another $500.
Very good.
So,
excellent work.
so I just wanted to point that out. Thanks State Bank, and the fees came down, and the rate came in right 2.3%, and with our fee, it's going to be at 3.3%. So
Well, thank you for your work.
that's a great rate. So
Thanks for asking State Bank to help in that manner. I'm sure the residents will appreciate it.
and they've helped a couple other times. If you go back at some of the other bonds, they haven't won them all, but they've got 2 or 3 out there so far. So we want to thank them for all their concern for the community and stepping up and helping our residents.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we adopt the resolution.
Support. Okay.
Excuse me.
Any
who
further
supported
discussion?
it?
I did.
Mr.
Thank you.
Atkins. Any further discussion? Okay, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Adkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Supervisor?
Yes. Item B, under operational issues, the board will consider a resolution to authorize the updated Grand Blanc Township Support Emergency Operations Plan, EOP, in conjunction with the Genesee County and State of Michigan Emergency Management Agencies. We sent this out, David sent this out to the board. We have not published it. It has a lot of confidential information in it, but we received the template from the state and from the county, and our chief is here if any of our board members have any additional questions after reviewing the
So
document.
moved.
Okay.
Support.
All right. Any-
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
to the attorney, in reading the documents, it didn't appear to be a resolution. It seemed to be more an agreement or a contract that, rather than having a roll call vote.
If you don't mind, would you please still do roll call vote? Let's treat it like a resolution, even though it may technically not be that.
Okay, thank you.
There's been a support and
Yes,
second? Okay. Any further discussion? Ms. Lane?
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey, myself? Yes. Mr. Chair,
Yes.
thank you.
Item C, the board will consider a motion to approve the purchase of 30 new tactical plate carriers, trauma plate vests for the patrol division in the amount of $11,473.50, and authorize the township superintendent or supervisor to execute all related contracts or agreements.
I'll make the motion.
Okay?
Second.
Okay, motion supported. Just a little bit of discussion. We had our chief talk a little bit about this on Tuesday, and just for the public and for those attending the meeting. On Tuesday, we have a committee of the whole meeting, which is similar to a board meeting, but we discuss all these items in depth. And you know, we receive grants for many of these police vests and what have you, but very small price to pay for protecting our police officers. So, any further discussion on this item? Yeah, Mr. Thomas.
During, so this is gonna, through you to Chief Wiles. Chief Wiles, how many years is this good for again?
So the request is for the vest we wear each and every day.
Right.
We replace it
These
every
are
5 years.
over the vest.
These will last a little bit longer of that. These are not worn every day. These are stored and cared for daily with the officer. So lifespan of those probably 5 to 7 years.
So being that this is reoccurring, is there a reason why we're not putting this in your budget instead of taking it out of our general fund?
I don't know the answer to that. I know this is the first time that we have ever purchased the tactical carrier trauma plates. So I don't have a good answer to your question, except that it's not a yearly cost. It's every 5 to 7 expenditure.
Is there, through you to Attorney Laddie, is there a benefit or what? Why aren't we putting this in his budget?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I'd suggest you email Kathy Solstack and ask her. She'll reply. Our finance director.
Because I'd really like to start getting a good number on everyone's budget instead of taking it out of the general fund.
Sure. Let's email, if you can email Ms. Solstack and ask her, and I think that'd be a good question to ask. Okay. Anything else for Chief? Okay. Thanks, Chief.
I think I have the next one.
Yep, you have a few others, so you might just stay up there.
Until we get an answer.
So with that, and we can always, you know, right, that there's been a motion, it's been seconded.
Yes, sir.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, discussion. So, so on these, and I guess this is just happens to be the one with on the police department, but there are a number of items that seem to be coming up. Things like recurring expenses. We have, you know, there are certain things with we're going to be with fire. I mean, we managed to get things like replacing capital equipment and fire trucks on the agenda and kind of in the budget. So, I mean, this isn't a, you know, a $200 expense. So, and we should be able to plug these in over time. All the departments, not just fire, but where we have recurring expenses, you know, we should expect to see those in the specific department for which they're going to be used.
Chief, is this something new that we're going to have, or is this replacing something?
The vests?
These right here, this
The
30 tactical.
These are brand new. We've never had these in the department before.
So it's not something that, I mean, it's an opportunity that came up that we can get these? Or?
Correct. Well, they've always been available. But, you know, as you know, law enforcement has changed throughout the years, society has changed, and now it's almost a necessary piece of equipment to better equip our officers should they be put in a situation where they are needed.
Right.
Well, in this particular case, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Sorry.
Lonnie. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Mr. Atkin.
I know you probably already have a plan in place because we have such a top-notch police department, but without any operational answers or anything sensitive, will these new tactical vests be available, easily accessible to our school liaison officers?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Mr. And I think with regard to Mr. Mansour's question and Mr. Thomas, I think we'll ask Ms. Solstack that question, Mr. Lehman, when he's back. You know, and it's more of a process question than anything else.
Yep.
So I don't expect Chief to have that answer. I mean, that's more of a finance.
It's just happened to be your turn.
That's right.
Right. Mr. Thomas, do you have any further question?
I'd like to ask the people that made this motion if they could hold off until the end of this month until we get an answer from our finance director.
Well, I mean, we can move it to whatever budget we want to.
You want to just
You know,
amend
even
it to take it out of the police budget?
Looks like Earl's gonna say something profound.
Mr. Guzak?
Well, I just thought this is needed and they need to order it. I mean, we can decide which fund it comes out of, but I'd like to have this stuff completed tonight if we could, so that at least our officers will have it available as fast as possible. And then we can vote to say we want it to come out of a different fund or whatever.
Important thing in the world.
Yeah, Mr. Mansour?
So I was just saying, in this particular motion here, it doesn't actually say what
What?
budget it comes out of.
Mhm.
I mean, we mentioned on Tuesday it's coming out of the capital budget, but it doesn't actually say that
Right.
here.
Well, capital expenditures is a separate item, right?
Yeah, I will say in reference to this equipment, we have not had it before, but we do not know when it will be the most important item that we have. They just had a school shooting in this
Los
country
Angeles today.
Was there
We
really?
just don't know.
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't want to wait.
I would say let's figure out how we, I mean, the capital expenditures are things that don't necessarily fit into different budgets, but
Can we
take a look at
then
that issue.
make the motion that we take it out of, add it to the chief's budget and take it out of the chief's budget?
I think we take a look, we wait to talk to Ms. Solstack and
Okay,
Mr. Lehman
that
first.
works for me.
Mr. Massey?
That's the question.
Okay. We can move it around, I just don't want to screw things up by
Right.
presuming to know how it works, but, okay, so any other discussion on it? But let's find out how our capital expenditures work with regard to our budget. With that, this is just a motion, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr.
Yes, Mr. Massey?
Chair, I do have a question for the chief.
Yes, sir.
As we pass this.
Yes.
My question to you, chief. Based on you do a lot of research, I know that. Based on your research, when did you decide to buy these items that's very necessary to the safety of the,
Yeah, this item was actually planned for, there's been discussion about this item for quite some time. However, there's also a lot of discussion of when the right time to do it is. I've never been one, I think the board can attest to this, just to buy stuff. And the time has come that we need to have the equipment for the officers. We see this across the country day in and day out. Some of the acts of violence that are taken on law enforcement officers in situations that they're put in. Grand Lake Township's not immune to that. We may not have a school shooting tomorrow, but we could have a barricaded gunman. We have those throughout the year, every year for several years now. That we could respond to a man with a long gun at a gas station or anything like that. Our current level of protection of the vests that we wear are not sufficient, and that's the reason for the request.
And we've had an officer shot in the past responding also, so.
A question,
Mr. Thomas?
a question to you, and I know this really is, we just bought new rifles. We just bought new handguns. We're now buying these, and none of these come out of your budget. These are all
planned for in capital projects, yes.
But see, we don't plan on those. So my problem is that it's just not your budget. Don't get me wrong, Chief. But if it goes to your department, it should be in your budget. And if it's something that's reoccurring, it should definitely go into your budget.
I view, my operational budget are the day-to-day expenses I have to run the police department, my personnel, which takes up the vast majority of my operational budget. Equipment, as far as those that are needed on a daily basis, whether it's office equipment, whether it's, cartridges for the taser or replacement pads for AEDs, which we're going to talk about. Those things are replaced constantly throughout the year as we use them. Vehicles, the AED purchase we'll talk about next, the rifles, the handguns, those aren't, while they are done periodically, they're not a yearly expense.
But then we look at other.
With the exception of
Oh,
the
I
vehicles.
totally agree with you, Chief. But when you look at other people's budget, other departments' budgets, the fire budget, their everything, their vehicles are budgeted. Your vehicles aren't budgeted. Your vehicles comes out of the capital fund.
Correct.
The Chief Burdette plans for every single expense for the entire year, from a Band-Aid to a $1.2 million truck.
So my vehicles are planned for it, but they're just out of a different.
But they're coming out of different.
They are planned for it. It's not just one day I say, okay, I wanna buy some beer.
No, I understand that. No, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to get we've got to get our hands
And the
around
fire
having
department
the budget.
comes out of the millage, so that's why it partly
But-
gotta be.
Well, so does this come out of a millage?
Well, specifically though, noted for fire. Mr. Massey and then Ms.
I
Lynn.
believe, if I'm wrong, please correct me. I'm aiming this comment as Trustee Thomas. Trustee Thomas, I think you are arguing with the wrong person.
I'm not arguing.
Well, I think you're discussing this with the wrong person. He has nothing to do with how the budget is set up, basically.
Right.
Okay, so we shouldn't have this discussion with the chief.
I think that's why I said that I know that you won't be able to answer this, but I'm explaining to the chief on why a lot of folks up here have concerns about the budgeted items.
Well, let's
And then we
bring those
discuss
questions
it.
to
I
Ms.
will
Solstack
send
and-
this to our finance director.
Yep, I think that'd be the best. Okay, so on the, we voted on the
Nothing against
tactical
you.
plates. And let's move on to the AEDs, and the same applies that I think, as far as where it fits in capital expenditures and how that's all figured out, let's leave those questions for Mr. Limata and Ms. Solstack. I'm not prepared to answer them, I know that.
Mr. Bennett, I would move that we purchase the replacement automated external defibrillators as
Second.
requested.
Question.
Mr. Chair, I have just one question to the chief. I asked on Tuesday if you had an opportunity since then to check on whether or not there is a defibrillator in the senior center and the library.
I think.
You mentioned the senior center, but we have not gone to the senior center yet to check on that.
Okay.
And I think
We don't
we
know
had
that.
some dispute whether or not it's our responsibility anyway, so.
Well,
and I.
it's a public question, it's a public information.
If this board does not vote to have the chief do that, then it's purely a personal request.
Okay.
But this board did not request him to go into the senior center to check that. It's on city property, and it's not a facility that we manage, so.
We don't own it.
While I hope that their
Yes, you
AED
do.
works, it actually, if we're going there checking on it, it appears that it's our responsibility. And at this point, it's managed by a separate organization, and it's on city property, so if the chief chooses to stop by there, it's his own, doing it on his own personal time, but we're not asking him to as a board. At least, I don't think there's a motion to. So, with that,
Mr. Chair.
yes, Mr. Atkins.
I know you mentioned, excuse me, I know you mentioned it Tuesday, Chief, but the ones we have right now, there's still some life left in them, correct?
There is, but minimal life, yes. They're operational.
Okay, and how long does it take to get these?
If we ordered them tomorrow, I could probably get them within 2 weeks.
All right, so, I don't know, I'd like to see if there was any support in the board to kind of split the baby tonight on these two items and see if this one, just to force some discussion into getting these items into the appropriate budget, if this one could be held back until we get this into the police budget.
One thing, if that will be discussion, one thing to consider is we are getting some trade-in value for our current AEDs. I do not know how long that will be available to us, and if that decreases over time. I just don't have that answer.
I don't see any problem with us finding the right place to put this in after, we're committing to it, but I don't even know when the check must be written, so, probably aren't gonna pay for them until we receive them, but, Mr. Mansur?
So, this is kind of going under the umbrella of making sure that we have transparency in what each of our departments actually cost. And as Trustee Thomas has mentioned, we've done a good job of buttoning that out for the fire department. But I think, we as a board should see each of these departments as the amount of money that we're spending on them, and not have to look across 3 or 4 different accounts. So I'm very much in support of getting all the right costs, funneled into the right department. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we need to make sure everything's accounted for and the right cost center is right. Mr. Lane?
I've made a suggestion in the past, I'll make it again, that we don't do a journal entry of things that are in the capital expenditures that we spend for the departments, and we could ask the auditors and again the finance director to make those journal entries, especially this year, so that you can see what actually was charged to each department. Just a suggestion.
My only concern is that these things, I don't want to be the one that fails is used on.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, I agree. This has to be, purchased immediately, because even though the other ones are okay, we don't know when they're going to go down or not work or not, and you've got the foresight to say, we need them now, so I don't want to go against your foresight, because you're dealing with these machines, we're not.
I think we.
And I think we do have to, like Mr. Mansur was saying it, and Mr. Thomas, and even everyone is saying, we need to change this budget process, and I agree with that, so, but we have to attack that hard and make sure we get it done, but at least get these things passed today.
Or understand limitations, what we may, what our finance person says the limitations of doing that. I don't know if there are any, but I want to
Doesn't
get
seem like there'd be any limitations, it's just a matter of saying,
Yeah.
it goes to this department, or goes to this.
Yeah, I don't know,
And then
but,
direction to apply it to the department budget.
so, Mr. Atkins?
I can't remember now. Did I support this motion? Because I'd like
No.
to, no?
I made the motion, Mr. Guzak supported it.
So could I make a friendly recommendation to see if you'd be willing to amend the motion to put this one out of the police, put this dollar amount into the police budget? So that's part of this motion?
To me, I really don't know how this thing, if we can use capital funds to put into the police budget. It's just moving, if it was just moving money around, I wouldn't have any problem, but I don't know how that works, and we don't have anybody from finance here to say as such, so that's my only concern.
If I'm not mistaken, we have a capital budget associated with other departments, like fire department. And I'm not sure whether DPW has one, but if it doesn't, boy, we ought to be really looking at that.
If what, I'm sorry?
If DPW doesn't have a capital budget, we ought to really be looking at that, because we're buying all kinds of vehicles and all stuff, all kinds of stuff.
Certainly do. Capital budget for all the sewers.
That's right, so we have a capital budget for fire, we have a capital budget for DPW, somehow we don't have one for police.
I don't know.
You don't have one for the police?
Apparently not, or else this would be budgeted out of that.
It comes out of,
And it may be, I
this
don't know.
comes out of our general capital
Our capital improvement plan. That's what this is coming
for
out.
the
Yeah.
township,
Right.
where everyone else has it for their department.
Right.
I'm pretty confident we have one for the police department.
Yeah.
That's what,
Well, then
the other
it's easy.
items I purchased throughout the year have come out of that fund.
Well, if that's the case, then
Then-
let's take it out of your budget.
Yeah.
I mean, my capital improvement plan is something that goes before the board during the
Yeah.
budget process every year.
Yeah.
I think, which was approved for the early late 18 for 19.
I think Mr. Massey's correct. We're putting Chief on the spot for something that he's not necessarily responsible for in terms of how this thing's laid out, but
I was just asking for
I
an
know.
amendment to
And
the...
we're going to
I'm interested what.
we're going to get with Kathy Solstack. We'll talk with her tomorrow, and our finance director, and find out why it's set up this way and get an answer to everybody. But I hate to change things in terms of what fund it comes out of in case we screw things up by doing that. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, I have a comment to make. This is the board, don't take this comment the wrong way. And I think Chief made this comment too. This is not the first time this has happened. We act as though this is the first time it has occurred. So what it requires from the board, I think, is for the board to go back and revisit this at a later date. Because if we're trying to hold up something and trying to piecemeal it here tonight, and we've done this in the past, then what were we thinking in the past? That's my comment.
Okay, so there's a motion that's on the floor right now. I know that Mr. Atkins asked to the creator of the motion to amend it to move it to the police department budget. But other than that, the motion is on the floor right now to support expenditure. Mr. Massey?
I do have one question to the board. Can anyone tell me where this would delay the process of approving the budget? If we,
No, we're going to be approving next year's budget, so this won't hold that up.
are you sure?
Yeah.
We're gonna.
No,
It
it
won't
won't.
bother this budget. It won't have any effect on the 2020 budget. It's expended this year.
You mean as far as looking at the process?
Yeah, I was thinking that it will affect this budget because this budget is built off of last year's budget,
We still have some time to change some things.
right?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
budget
Yeah.
is built off of last year.
If we want some things moved around, we still have
Yeah,
time.
it could be
You do.
amended. You know,
Mr.
that's-
Laddie?
You can amend it, this is in your 2019 budget, you can, and it's in a different spot in your budget, and you want to have it moved to the police, we can do that with a budget amendment. It's not, in fact, we do budget amendments beyond our
But we're
fiscal
not
year,
gonna do it.
right?
Well,
So that's easily doable.
No, we won't.
But the other thing that I'm interested in is your next item is going to be 2020 budget review request, and so I think.
So, David, if it's been requested that we make this expenditure from the police budget. Do you see any impediment to us, if, we determine that, hey, we need to move some money out of the capital to the police budget to pay for these, is that?
Well, all you're doing is you're just taking it from a different part of your budget, which may require an amendment.
Okay.
But amending your budget is easy.
All right, so there's no problem in doing what Mr. Atkins has requested of the makers of the motion, if they would be willing to change their motion.
Pretty sure that's
I have no problem with changing it, because the other explanation is we don't adopt a line item budget in the
Right.
police department.
That's by
It's a
department.
total department budget, so
Right.
somewhere in a number of lines,
It fits in.
it can be squeezed in somewhere, so I have no problem with it coming out of the regular police budget
who
rather
supported
than
your motion?
capital. Mr. Guzak.
Would you?
Yeah, I'll support that.
Okay. All right.
But Mr. Chair, I still
Yes.
have a concern. And I think trustee Mansour raised the issue too. It doesn't say whether it's capital.
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
It doesn't say what, I'm sorry?
it doesn't say what is capital or R.
We're saying,
It doesn't say whether it's coming out of the police budget.
Right, and part of that might be my fault, because basically I wrote the agenda instead of Mr. Limita for this week. And so,
Okay.
this is not Mr. Limita's writing, this is probably Ms. Gilman and myself that put this together, and we didn't specify whether it was capital expenditure or what have you.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Lane?
if the gentlemen had their budgets here and looked under capital improvement plan at the back of your budget, you'll see under fiscal year 2019, everything that we're paying for the police department totaling $309,000 coming out of the capital improvement fund.
So it's in there already?
It's in the capital improvement fund.
Portion of
And
For
what
police.
For police. And if we have two options, either start a new line item in the police department budget or instruct our auditors and our finance department to make a budget adjustment of $309,000 or $310,000 to the police department so that you see the total amount and you don't have to look in two places.
Well, I've got to
So-
believe, there's some reasons for why they do things. We receive an award every year for how we follow the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, our chart of accounts, the whole work. So if we're not doing something according to Hoyle, then the industry standards are off, and we need to tell them. But otherwise, we're following what they suggest. But I think we can clarify with, I think it's more of a clarification than us instructing anybody to do something. I think they'll instruct us on why they do it the way they do. But, so with Kathy's information, does that change the request for the change of the motion, or?
I say that David, or through you to Attorney Laddie, do we have to vote down the first motion, or can they take it off the table and then put another motion on the floor?
We can change, we amended the motion, so we can
Well, you guys, there's been a request to amend the motion. Do the maker and the second agree or not?
They did.
We did.
So,
If
we're
you
good,
want to
right?
come out
We
of
don't
it.
So can you reiterate your motion then, Kathy?
That the request for the $25,002 for the defibrillators, as requested, come from the police budget rather than the capital improvement fund.
Mr. Chair.
So the same thing I wanted to do on C.
That's what you wanted to do, but it wasn't done specifically.
I'll support.
It was already supported by Mr.
Well,
Guzak.
this is a new motion.
Well,
Okay. We're gonna move in a
May I
minute.
ask a question?
Sure.
Based on what Clerk Lane has put on the table, what happens if we learn that it remains as it is?
It doesn't have to.
What do you mean? Because of the government standards for
Yes.
county?
It's not a government standard.
Then we'll either
like
have
that.
to have ours non-conforming or we'll fit in. Mr. Laddie?
Move it back.
Right, oh, you mean, yeah.
You make an amendment.
If we just moved it to an improper cost center, then we'll move it back.
Right. I thought he meant if we find out our policy, we want to change our policy.
You're the treasurer.
Okay, with that, I think we've beat this thing to death. We have a motion, it's been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item E, the board will review the fiscal year 2020 annual budget. Thank you, Chief. Requests, and we've talked about that on Tuesday. I think Mr. Mansour, you emailed your question to Ms. Ostat.
It was something that was related to line items in the earlier account.
Okay. All right. Next item, the board will review the streets and roads policy that the subcommittee put together.
Mr. Chair,
Everybody has a copy of it?
before you move on, I mean, we have this item, and again, we have 2020 budget coming up.
Okay.
We're gonna need to adopt that in early December. We've got the end of our November meeting. We've got a committee of the whole meeting in December. Do you want to have Ms. Sostak here to answer questions just like we talked about tonight in anticipation of adopting the 2020 budget? Do you want to have her here at your
I think so.
at your last November meeting
Absolutely.
and set aside some time to talk about
Absolutely.
exactly the
Yep.
issues?
Yeah,
Great.
I think so.
Yep.
Okay.
Do we have to schedule a public hearing yet, or will that occur
No,
in December?
well, we're going to be noticing the public hearing for your Thursday meeting in December, and so,
Okay.
again, we got 2 bites at the apple before we have that public
Right,
hearing.
okay. All right, so next item on the agenda is reviewing the streets and road policy that our committee drafted, and we talked about this at length on Tuesday. Mr. Laddie?
Well, go ahead and we'll have Mr.
Mr. Atkins?
Atkins kick the ball off.
Well, maybe you go first and explain the changes, and then
Yeah.
I can ask a question.
We had some specific discussions about items that appeared to be not as precise as they needed to be in the original draft as presented. And one of those things had to do, we had a discussion about, for example, the percentage of frontage that we want on petitions. We wanted to add some additional information to let property owners know that we are, although our bare minimum requirement is 51% of the lineal frontage, we want people to shoot for 55% or higher. If you want to go higher than 55%, we can certainly do that. But the point is, we don't want them to stop at 51, we want them to keep going. And so that change is reflected in item number 5. We took out, there was a comment, I'm trying to think, we had a fairly long discussion about private roads and some of the imprecise language that was in the original draft. And so what I did was, I struck the language that we had in there that talked about the ability of associations to get financing, and also struck the language about the potential increase in costs, and just simply put that the township does not create SADs for privately owned roads. What I wanted to put in there was, at the time of the creation of this policy, the township doesn't create SADs for private roads. Because you can see, and I don't know if my comment made it into your draft, because
No,
this
it
is
did not.
basically a red line.
No.
But my comment is the SAD statute does allow for SADs for private roads. if the board would like to consider a draft policy to allow it, the roads committee could meet with Director Sears and Jack Whitley to draft a sample policy. Because we began to talk about how the requirements for a private road for individuals interested in it have more requirements and have a few more hurdles than public roads, if you can believe that. I know they both have a lot of hurdles. And so that was my thought process with the amendment to the private roads. My impression is that you guys want to explore a private road policy, and you want to probably see what that looks like, and you want to see what the additional costs and issues might be for people. For example, hiring an engineering firm and things like that. And so my solution to that problem was to say, in this draft, that the details relate primarily to public roads, almost exclusively to public roads. Let's explore a private road policy and see what it looks like before we make a decision. And we can do that relatively quickly.
Supervisor Bennett?
Yes, Mr. Manager.
Yeah. So, I agree with the board taking a hard look at what the private road policy would look like. But as I look at the amendment here, I guess I would prefer if we could just strike out private roads and the remaining sentence, because when you go to the next section, it says scope. This policy covers all local roads owned by Genesee County Road Commission within the Charter Township. So really, this other stuff is not really pertinent to that. So we would have to probably create a second policy for private roads.
You're correct, and it's redundant to say that, to have it both ways. I'm happy to take that out if that's what you prefer.
That would be just my recommendation.
I would concur with that.
I don't have any problem with it. How's the rest of the board feel? Ken?
One of the things, I'm fine. I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay,
Joe?
so that section's gone.
Okay.
With the understanding again that, and again, we had a pretty
If we
good meeting
choose
on
to.
Monday with the road committee. Let's do it again either next week or the following week and hammer out a draft of a private road
If
policy.
that's where the board wants to go. But
Where
I'm not convinced we want to. But
I do.
I know you do, Kathy.
I know.
But hold on, I'm talking about just creating. What would the policy look like? What do the steps look like? And what are the pros and cons for private roads? I'm not saying that we're gonna present it for adoption. It'll be consideration to the board.
Yeah, I think we're open to talking about any of those issues.
Sure.
Mr. Thomas?
One of these, you guys did a really nice job.
It was David.
Oh,
it wasn't.
David, you did a really nice job.
It was a nice collaborative effort, and we'll do it again for private roads.
You guys did a nice job. One of the things I would like to see in this, residents come in and they say, I want to build a road. And we say, you need to set an appointment up with our DPW director or assistant director, right?
Or go down there and just talk to somebody, and they'll
Or
probably
go down there.
hand this to them for starters.
Yeah. Is there-
And say, here's part of what you need to know to start with.
So one of the things that I'm concerned with is, and I might be getting in the weeds of operation, but I don't think so, because this is about policy and procedure. I think that we should have some type of a timeline. So Mr. Jones comes in, I want to build our road. And they give a synopsis to whoever's there, or they leave a message for somebody to call. So we're asking our residents to do something above and beyond. So maybe we should have a timeline in there. Somebody will get back with you in 48 hours, or we will get back with you in 48 hours.
We actually discussed that issue at the meeting, and actually the township staff has a policy already, and it's within 24 hours. That they are to respond to any request within 24 hours. So any phone call that somebody calls in, email, or stops in and visits, the policy is 24 hours.
Can we put put an asterisk? Add that?
Would we have to do that in every single policy, though, that we come up with?
I think it would be really bragging about the service that we offer our residents.
I think that's Dennis's customer service policy that he holds employees to. I don't know if it's written anywhere that we've got a 24-hour turnaround. I mean, if you want to do that, you can, right? But here's the problem. You've got people dealing with website, you got people walking up to the counter, you got people talking to, maybe you'll have somebody at a neighborhood association meeting. It would be tough to say to Sears, the first time somebody mentions the road, you better get back to them within 24 hours. Because you gotta run the clock from when he gets it.
I give the time.
Well, it could be 48, could be whatever. But if you put it, you're gonna put them on the clock. You gotta make sure that the
You're
people
gonna
know
have
about it.
a director and a deputy director.
Yep.
I think if we don't have the right people on the jobs, then we deal with that situation separately. If we have people that are not getting back to people in a timely manner, that's a whole other issue, I think.
Well, I mean, okay, I'm sorry. Go
That's
ahead,
all right.
Lonnie. I'm sorry.
Mr. Atkins, you don't have to apologize.
If
I
I
just,
understand what trustee Thomas is
Mr.
asking.
Atkins, Mr. Atkins.
I'm sorry. Trustee Atkins asking.
One thing that I do see that I think could really help this board that's missing out of this is the feedback loop. You know, we've seen some of the confusion and some of the emails from other subdivisions that have asked for this, and the amount of time and effort it went into it. And I just feel that by the time the board got put in the loop on it, we were actually brought into the loop by residents versus our staff here. So I think somewhere in there, I think it would be appropriate for you know, some sort of notification to the board through email or something, just a heads up, that a summary of, hey, I got this request from such and so sub, because you start to get residents calling and trying to work the board and find out what's going on, and half the time you don't really know where it is in the process, and you can add a lot of confusion to it that we don't necessarily need to be involved in at that high of a level.
well, I'll tell you what, I get phone calls from people that, hey, I'm interested in paving my street, what do I need to do? And I tell them to call Mr. Sears, and they need to talk with him and go through the process. I think any other board member that gets a phone call from a resident asking about, hey, I want to know where I'm at in this process, we should direct them to Mr. Sears. And you tell them that, hey, if he doesn't get back to you, or there's an issue that he's not dealing with, then you call me back and we'll bring it to the board. But I think the first stop for anybody that's a resident, it's if they, hey, you know, I called the fire department and asked about a burn permit and nobody called me back, then the board, you know, can say, hey, you know what, I need to talk to Mr. Lehman about that. But if somebody calls me and says, hey, I need to know, you know, what the requirements are for a burn permit, you know, I'd direct them. And that's one of the things that I think I've learned, is that, you know, rather than trying to track down the information for them, it's better that we teach them that, you know what, let me give you the phone number for the fire department to call yourself, because you know what, I want those people, and even on social media, doing that so that everybody else that's listening, hey, they're not calling me to find out about roads, and the same goes for the clerk and treasurer, with them being right up front. It's easy for them to get roped into, hey, what do I need to do to build a road? Well, they probably know the answer, but guess what? They need to know, and they do, turn it over to Jeff Sears. You know, same with the water issues. So as far as a feedback loop in terms of keeping us informed, you know, at any given time, we've got half a dozen subdivisions that have mentioned that they're interested. They're all in different stages. You know, we probably have half a dozen right now that the board probably isn't even aware of that has inquired or started down the path, but some of them, it takes them a couple of years. You know, we have some that have come to us that they thought it was too expensive, including Thrush. They come back a few years later and reconsider it. So I think, you know, a lot of this is, all of this except for our policy and how it's going to work, is operational. And if we have got residents calling us, what's that? The street process.
I don't see how this is operational.
We're making a policy and a procedure. This is our guidelines to make it operational after we agree on this. So this is not operational.
This
you know,
will be,
what Lonnie was saying, the issue is that we get brought into a loop halfway. We get phone calls from residents, or residents come to the meeting and say, I've been meeting with your superintendent or your clerk for 8 months and nothing's happening. And then next thing you know, we're standing there saying, what the heck is going on? So what he's saying is, you know, we just had the issue with the insurance company and the lady with the front yard issue. And so we want to know, what Lonnie's saying is we want to know what, it could be this procedure, but we want to know if there is a snag, we want to know that there's a snag.
Yeah. Well, let me clarify.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Al.
The drafting of this policy is governance.
Right.
The fulfilling of this is operational.
Right.
And what I'm saying is, this is operational. Once we do the governance part and approve it.
That's why we better get it right.
What Lonnie
Let's do it right. Let's do it
What
right.
Lonnie is suggesting is that, I don't know, maybe if there's a problem, that they know who to contact. If for some reason one of these things is going awry, that we put in there who they're to contact. Maybe that, you know, if the DPW director isn't responding or what have you, then they have, you know, a contact person that they go around. But
Right.
I think it's dangerous for, well, just put it this way, I want to make sure that we give them an opportunity to have somebody to complain to, but I don't want to have staff involved in, you know, hey, I got pulled over by a police officer and I'm not happy. You know, oh, well, tell me all about that. You know, well, you know, my first response is, you know what, you need to talk.
Call the chief.
You need to talk to the chief. If they call me back and say, hey, the chief is refusing my phone calls, then guess what? Now I've got an issue as a board member.
Can I just clarify, Scott?
But I think the first thing is we've got to let the department head handle it. And that's part of this, is clarifying that this is operational, and that's why we want to get board members out of it. Al had his hand up.
Yeah, so I had, it's interesting, because I had a different take on that point. Let me make a picayune thing, and then I want to, so on the top of the page here, it says, underneath here, it says page 6 of 3 and page 7 of 3. So maybe we could just fix that one.
Yes.
But maybe, I'd like to make a suggestion that during our monthly DPW report, the one that we get every month, that we include a specific section on roads. And if we have someone, a group or a neighborhood that's come in and wants to apply for a special assessment district or get the thing started, that we just make sure that every month that we have an understanding of what's in the queue and where it is in the process. Now that won't obviously happen, I mean, it won't help us in a week, but we're generally talking about things that take, you know, a month or 2 or 3 to fester. So we would at least, if we're doing our diligence reading the materials, that we would know those.
Right.
Now the other issue that, so I
think that's a very good suggestion, and we can pass along Mr. Sears.
So the other part is, though, I think Trustee Atkins is concerned that that maybe in this policy that we ought to give people an expectation of a certain turnaround or response here. And I don't know that...
on which portion of it?
Well, for instance, it says the director will evaluate the type and scope of repair. So could we say that the director will, you know, develop the type and scope of repair within 14 days?
Well, that would be okay, except he's going to have to work hand in hand, and that's a euphemism, with Genesee County Road Commission. And so if the Road Commission does not join him in an evaluation of the road or the scope of the preliminary project, that could be a problem.
Part of the problem is one of our subdivisions, it took 1.5 years to get that information from the road.
Well, let me, I think what they're really saying, and let me bring it on home. Okay, if someone comes in, okay, and talk to the director, giving an example, okay? What the board should know, I can go to the director if someone calls me. I can go to the director and ask the director, let me see your log. If the director doesn't have a log, then the director is failing to respond to the board. That's what they're really saying.
Yep.
And I'm just breaking it down in simple terms. We need a log. So if someone called Trustee Mansour, okay, and he said, well, I'll get back with you tomorrow. he can call either the assistant director or the director. They got a log and he can tell them immediately. Okay, no, we don't have that log.
You mean as far as contacting the road commission, or
I'm not talking
getting back to the individual?
I'm not
you're
talking
saying?
about contacting the road.
Getting back to the individual
What
that's interested.
we're lacking as a board member, let me make it simple, is a log.
I know, but what's the log going to detail is what I'm
The
asking.
log would tell me whether that person is accurate or inaccurate.
The person coming in requesting to have their roads paved.
Well,
Where he is in the line.
Yeah, where he's in the process.
In the process.
Yeah.
okay, if John Doe came in on the 2nd and spoke to the director,
Right.
the director got a log that John Doe came in on the 2nd, 502 Slate Lane. Okay? On the 3rd, Sue Ann came in and talked to the director about road. That's a log on the 3rd, Sue Ann, at 1300 P Street. That's the way it should be run.
And that's last summer we.
So what?
Last summer we authorized Superintendent Limita to buy this program, the computer program, for 80 some odd $1,000 that shows where we're at. And so if Bill.
City Works is it, but that's City Works, and what it is it's actually jobs that we're doing. It wouldn't include the roads.
No, but that was part of it, that it was.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Let me
ask you a
clarify.
question. I got a question for you, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
What did you say about the suggestion that I made?
I think it's a good idea.
I thought you said you didn't think it was a good idea.
No, I didn't. But the City Works software is more like, hey, there's an issue with somebody's sump pump lead. Let's say I have one of our technicians go out and look at it. So they type it in, or somebody calls in, hey, my water's cloudy, they type it in. The person out in the field is like, oh, there's, let me stop at this house, and then they respond to it, what have you. The road, let me clarify this road thing. I have not heard any complaint from any individual that, with regard to our DPW department not responding.
Nope.
What the issue is that, let me give you an example. You had somebody from a neighborhood say, hey, I'm interested in paving my road, Scott. I pass that along to Mr. Sears. He has a discussion with them. The person emails, hey, it's been a month or two, I haven't heard anything from you guys. It's like, hey, you know what, the road commission tells us that they're backed up by 6 months in terms of getting these requests back, and it isn't just Grand Blanc Township, I hear it from the entire, cadre of township supervisors. But it's the, hey, you know what, I haven't, like I said, it was a year and a half for one of the subs, the one off Center Road, before we got an estimate or the scope of the work, which includes what is the scope of the work. So I don't see any problem with logging who is called and asked about, having the road done, or who Jeff or Mr. Sears has met with. But in terms of holding Mr. Sears' feet to the fire on the response from the road commission, it's going to be tough to do that because the road commission works at their own pace. But actually, in our committee, we actually thought about the idea of actually having Mr. Wheatley from Rowe Engineering come out and do an estimate on the scope of the work instead of waiting for the road commission to give us that. So it might make it more timely. The only concern that actually Mr. Laddie and Mr. Sears brought up is that the only problem we run into is that Mr. Wheatley comes up with one estimate, and then we pass it on to the road commission. They say, hey, you know what, this thing's got to be raised another $100,000. Now we've got residents in the predicament of saying, I want to go with the cheaper one. Well, the road commission is actually the one that does the work. So the bottom line is that we end up confusing residents even more. So we are reliant on, the road commission would be glad to give us responsibility for our roads, financially and every other way that we want. They'll hand them over tomorrow to
But
us
Mr.
if we want.
Chair, I have a question.
Sure.
I would think, let me use myself as an example. I would think if I was the director of DPW and someone came in and wanted to initiate a road repair, okay? I would think and I'm not here to degrade Jeff, but I guess I am when I say this. I would think if I was in that job, I've been in that job for at least 5 years, and I don't have no knowledge of how long it takes the road commission to respond, then that tells me that I'm not doing my job. Because if you work with the road commission, you have some idea how long it takes them to respond based on the scope of the work.
I disagree because their time frame changes from year to year. They have had a huge change in personnel there. I mean, if we go another year as we have, we certainly can tell people it's going to be at least a year before they get but up until now, you know, it hasn't been more than a year. But if a year ends up being the standard, I think Mr. Sears would be glad to tell him that.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think he. I think he probably does tell him that.
If Mr. Sears is doing his job, Mr. Chair, if I'm not going to back off of this, if Mr. Sears is doing his job and he's communicating with the road commission as he should be, as we think he should be,
and
he has an idea how many new employees that they brought on board, and it takes time to bring them up to the level that they should be at.
There's one person that does the estimating, Richard Hill.
Yes.
For the road commission. And Mr. Sears does, when somebody calls in, he does tell them, hey, I can't guarantee when this estimate's going to get back to us. The road commission, you know, for example, Flushing has, I think, 8 projects right now, and the road commission told them, guess what? We're only going to do 1 a year. Mr. Sears does identify what kind of time frame people are going to have in terms of a wait. People aren't happy with it, but it's the county that's
that's what I'm saying. In his log, he will have it logged that, okay, I estimated that it's going to take 3 months for me to get back with you. So that would be in the log.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, he does that, and that could be done.
Okay.
Supervisor.
Okay. Mr. Thomas?
See, I think I missed the whole exercise of this because I'm not looking at current staff, I'm looking at staff. I'm looking at that we're putting together a policy and procedure. I don't really care what's happening I do care what's happening day to day right now, but this is supposed to be our policy and procedure, and I'm looking at the policy that I'd like to see into it, and the procedures on how we get to that.
So what are we missing?
We are a premier community, and I want this procedure to reflect.
So what are we missing?
Well, like Joe said, I think that's, I'm sorry, Trustee Massey, I think that's a great idea with the queue. I think that's something easy. But these are the things that I want to be able to give our residents.
I think if, you know, Mr. Mansour suggested that maybe Mr. Sears puts it in his monthly or DPW
I think that's outstanding.
You know, that'll create a log right there.
So we don't have to say, someone will get back with you in 48 hours. And, you know, but this is an open dialogue about what we expect from our community and what our residents can expect from us.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't want to get bogged down in names.
I think the only complaints we've had is that people have received mixed messages in terms of what's required.
Absolutely.
It isn't anything to do with time frame of people getting back with them or anything else. I think that what we need to do is have a policy that we can hand to people and we know who to direct. I would like us to have one person here at the township that does the speaking for what our policy is on the roads.
And it's not any of us.
Because that way we can hold that person accountable if somebody comes to us and says, well, I was told this, and it's outside of what our parameters are in our policy.
That's 90% of the issues we have. That's why why we're putting together these policy and procedures, is so that we tell everyone we're a premier, so let's be a premier.
Right.
The 90% of it is misinformation. One person hears one thing, the next person hears totally different.
Well, I'd like to put this in a brochure form as well. Mr.
Awesome idea.
So, I mean, I want to keep the meeting moving along a little bit, and I think we kind of
killed this one.
Yeah, I think we beat this one pretty much. So we had, I think the draft on here, we made a couple of suggestions on a couple of changes.
Yep.
I'd
like to get something moving so
yeah,
we can
so
give it to people.
I guess we
so
have
can
support.
We approve it with the changes?
Yeah.
Yes.
So what are, can you go back through the changes that you're suggesting?
Yeah, it's just like,
And just adding the Q.
Well, the queue, or the log is not.
Is not in here.
You don't have that early in this policy.
Put it in there.
And so what we're doing is we're taking out any mention of private roads, because we're gonna develop a separate private road policy, a hypothetical private road policy for you to consider. We're gonna change the page numbers, and this isn't in its final format, right? I mean, this isn't a working format.
So we're not gonna add it up with all our notes on and say,
I'm sorry? We're gonna go through and we're gonna evaluate again Kathy's semicolons and commas. And then we'll be done. Understanding also though, again, hand in hand, we're gonna develop that private road policy. From what I heard tonight, we're not adding any time frame for a response for the reasons we talked about, but we are gonna direct Sears to say, keep us informed in your board reports, keep a running log, actually start an entry, contacted by, it seems like all our subdivisions have green in it. So let's say Green Acres on such and such a date, contact the road commission by such and such a date, waiting for responses.
right.
And move through it that way. So
Yep.
the only changes that we have to this policy so far is putting it in its formal format and deleting any mention of private roads.
Right.
Am I
you
right?
know, if we would have had gone through with this, the strategic planning, all this could have been done then. Maybe we should
All right.
look at that.
We'll get back to that.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Mansell?
This horse isn't probably gone yet. But the last comments that Attorney Laddie made, do we need to put like mentioning a log in here so the process is initiated by an interested resident, providing information and location, time of prayer, at which time a log is created or an entry to a log is created?
Yeah, how about we do this? How about on number 2?
Okay.
We put director will evaluate the type and scope of repair, and then we'll add a second sentence that will say, and enter. Let me think of what we'll do.
Establish a timetable.
Well, enter the not
Request,
inquiry, but the request regarding such and such subdivision into a special assessment district project log.
Yes.
That we're
For
reporting.
regular reporting to the board
Yeah,
or something? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, are we good with those changes then?
I have them and I'll make them, and if you do pass this tonight, it'll be subject to those.
Well, we don't have a motion yet, so.
Oh, I'll make a motion.
Okay, is there support? Is this a resolution?
I don't think it's a motion, right?
It's just it's a creation of policy, so
So we
it's
don't
just
need to have, okay.
Do we need to see this before? I don't.
I think we've seen it.
I trust the.
I'll send it out to you guys for your final review, but
I don't.
I'll make the changes. You won't be acting on it again unless it's messed up.
Okay.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I'm gonna skip over the strategic planning.
Oh, come on.
I've got some
You have
dates.
enough votes right now.
I've got some dates in December I will send out by email to you and you can tell me
By
the work.
December.
But the problem, I have a problem in December. It's
Okay.
too busy, so we're gonna have to figure out something else. One of the things under board reports is Mr. Atkins, I think has a great idea. And under my report, I'd like him to talk a bit about what he's suggesting we do with the tree lighting event coming up. Would you mind, or you want me to?
I can, you want me to start it now?
Can we go to in order?
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
All right, Mr. Mansur, I take it you're.
I thought you wanted to speed the meeting up.
I didn't mean to usurp your report.
Sorry, I'm just, yeah.
If we had a strategic.
I sit through these, okay, so.
I was trying to help you.
If we had a strategic process, we would have gone through
So
it
the
all.
planning commission met with the consultants and a number of people on the master plan over the last week or two here. And we had a lot of people come to the meeting. It was kind of a joint meeting with the steering committee and the planning commission. We're continuing to work through the different sections of the master plan. We had a couple additional residents and other people come to the meeting and weigh in. So we're getting some traction there. We have, at the time, we had over 400 responses to the surveys that are sent out. So we're picking up some steam there, but obviously it works better if all of us get engaged in our spheres of influence and the people we talk to talk to them about this survey and get the input. So I'd like to encourage the board members to be ambassadors for that and to do those. There's also some documents around that you can scan. Just it's a quar symbol that you can go right to the survey and fill it out. So that was first thing, and regarding the Planning Commission. Second thing, Metro Alliance. Just a couple things for the 20 to 23 Transportation Improvement Program. Amendment number 2 was approved with respect to the township. There's a little additional money being added in to continue some improvements, actually beginning in 2020 to a section of I-75 that goes through the township. I think it does, doesn't it? Southern Genesee County, and then it comes up. Yep. So there's a portion of money that's being done to mill and then put some new asphalt overlay planned for next year. Also, there's some additional money being planned for upgrades to traffic signals on Hill Road from Fenton to Saginaw. So those are really the new things. Also, it's an interesting thing that we might want to know about here, but there's a new project added to Innovative Coordinated Access and Mobility Grant. It's area-wide, but it increases access to on-demand, non-emergency medical transportation for seniors. And so that's a new project coming on. They're dedicating around $918,000 to that. So it's a fiscal year 2020 program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mansur.
For the few people that are still here in the audience, on the back table are some of the cards that Director Lloyd left about the master plan and how to get to that survey. If people would take the time to pick it up. And
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Clerk Lane.
Lonnie, anything, or Mr. Atkins, anything on Parks and Rec this time? Or?
Saturday.
Nothing on Parks and Rec, but I haven't really been reporting out much from the ZBA, so I just wanted to, one item. There seems to be over the last 10 to 12 months a trend to variance requests for larger garages, and it seems to be a lot of people have larger items, RVs or something, and they want to get those out of their yard and into some shelter. So I've asked Director Mark Lloyd to maybe compile majority of them, if not all of them, we have approved. I think they met the criteria to approve those requests. So I don't know at what point that triggers. If you approve 10 or 12 of them, at some point I think we should look at the ordinance.
Yeah.
So that's really it from ZBA, but Director Lloyd's going to put together a little report on it.
I think that's been done with decks, I think, as well, right?
You're correct.
So, good move. Okay, Mr. Massey, probably nothing on fire at this point.
The only thing I can say is the attorney may wish to make a comment about when the fire commission may come back together.
Yeah, I'll do that. And so as you know, we've been negotiating for quite some time on how to resolve the ownership issue of the equipment and personal property of the department, and also the assets of the fire commission, which are primarily, I think it's safe to say that they're cash in various accounts. And so what we have done most recently is made, I think we've wrapped up the details regarding the personal property and equipment. And I think we've got a very expedited way to sort this out. And so Attorney Griffin is making an amendment to a prepared memorandum of understanding that I'll bring to you as soon as he prepares it, so that we can lock away those issues, and then we'll just be waiting for the results of a final audit from Yo and Yo to determine the distribution of the assets of the fire commission. And then finally we'll have the fire commission have its final meeting to disperse of all its assets and the equipment and sign titles over, and also hopefully to receive a hearty round of appreciation for all the efforts that they have engaged in. So I know it's been a long process, but we're closing in on the end.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lady. I don't think we have anything on the police. Mr. Thomas?
No, I'm good.
Okay, Mr. Guzak?
No.
Okay. Ms. Lane? I know you already reported on the election.
I reported on the election, we had a 13% turnout, but I would like to inform the board that in preparation for 4 elections next year, we're going to be doing some relocation of some of the precincts and drawing up some of the boundaries between now and the early part of January to meet the deadlines for next year.
I have a question. I've been reading in some of the MTA materials that there's some legislation that's working its way through our state legislature about changing the size of precincts from 2,999 max, I think, up to 5,000. What, I mean, there are crazy lines at some of these precincts now. What's up with that? I mean, do we have any?
Well, I can tell you that in the city of Flint, they have precincts that, I don't know how many
They have 60-some precincts in the city of Flint, and sometimes nobody shows up at them. But I'm, right now, because none of that is final, I am trying, based on the current law, to get things down below the 2,999 for each precinct, and also to encourage absentee voting. And we have been talking with Twin Cities, which is right next door, moving a couple of precincts over there, and we're close to having an agreement.
So this is may go up to 5,000, but not
I
have to.
have not heard anything like
Okay.
that coming through this. So I hope the state legislators table it, but it hasn't come through from the Secretary of State or through any of the election laws.
But to Mr. Mansour's point, is that the max, is 2,999 what it has to be set at, or is that?
That's the maximum that you can have in a
So we could have
precinct.
less.
So we could make our standard stay at that, even though
Yeah.
the state says you can go up to 5,000.
Yeah, okay.
Is
Well,
this something that the election commission will be voting on with the township, or is this?
It will go to, when I have things settled and organized, I will have a meeting with the election commission to inform you of how we're doing. And then there is paperwork and GIS information that has to be sent to the state prior to January the 10th so that it can be effective for all 4 of the elections next year. And new ID cards will go out to people, and hopefully it will accommodate more people.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ms. Lane.
Mr. Chair, could I ask one question regarding Ms. Lane's comments? Well, she's correct that she's nearly formalized an agreement with Twin Cities Baptist Church, and it is to arrange for us to use their property as a voting precinct on election day. Does the board feel that the election commission can approve that agreement, or do you want to see that agreement yourselves?
Well, the election commission's made up of Kathy, myself, and trustee Massey.
But do we want to see the contract?
Okay.
I don't
Does
know.
the board as a whole,
Probably
do you
any
want to see the
contract.
agreement, or do you want to have the election commission?
I think we
Well,
should.
for information, there has never been an agreement. It's one of those things where with the schools, and now we're down to Bethany Baptist Church, it's been our word and our handshake that has worked very well. But because of the need for more space here, Twin Cities has asked for a written agreement, and that's what
I think
Attorney
I'd like,
Laddie and I have worked on. And could I have, if they, do we have to approve it here before I can handshake with them? Because I can't be dilly-dallying with this sort of stuff.
well, when do you have to have the agreement with them done by?
ASAP. We're
I mean,
coming
not-
up with a,
We have no election coming up in the next several
we
months.
I have to have those types of changes to the state by the beginning of January.
Including the contract?
Everything that we're gonna do.
My only question is, do you guys want to see this at your last meeting in November, or do you want the election
They're
commission to
usually
do it?
like $200.
That's the question.
But Mr. Chair,
No.
Mr. Guzak and then Mr. Massey.
Yeah, one question I have is, Mr. Latter, will you be drawing up that contract for us?
I already have.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
just as a matter of principle, I think it's important that the township board look at any contract. that
Right.
we're
You're for
doing.
sure.
But, Mr. Massey?
Yes. The one
Yes.
thing the clerk said, Clerk Lane said that I totally disagree with. I
Okay.
don't believe, I do not believe in handshake agreement,
We didn't,
period. Period.
Didn't that get us in trouble? Didn't you want to make a promise
Yes,
that it would never happen under this board?
right.
yes.
But I, you know, whether it's myself or anybody else, and it's not any individual, it's just for me, I think our policy is that any contract that this township is making with anybody needs to be reviewed by us, whether it's Parks or Rec
That's
or
right.
whatever.
Our attorney should write it, and then we'll
Yes.
just review it.
Okay,
Right.
so it'll be on your agenda at the last meeting in
Yes.
November.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
And
Mr. Thomas?
For the election commission, Clerk Lane, can we add an agenda item that we write every type of agreement up for the rest?
As opposed to handshake.
Yeah, because
I'm saying that's the way it operated in the past, and now when we went to Twin Cities, we're doing a written agreement.
But I think what Mr. Thomas is asking is
Never
that
again.
any of the
Formalize
locations that we're
Yeah.
working with, that
Yeah.
we have an agreement, a written agreement.
never again are we going to do handshakes.
No more handshakes.
Never. Here's what happens. Every handshake agreement that I'm most familiar with, I don't wish any bad luck on Clerk Lane, but if she having to pass out of the line of duty,
We don't know what the agreements are.
we don't know what the agreement is.
Isn't that what we just spent 3 years dealing with? 2
Yes.
years?
Yes,
Yeah.
a handshake agreement.
Okay, so I think we've settled that. Mr. So I think Mr. Thomas is correct, that I think an agenda item for the commission is to have an agreement with any of the locations that we are using. Okay, on to a few things that I just want to report on. Some things are going to happen. I know Mr. Mansell reported on a few roads. Something that I'm aware of is that the Genesee County Road Commission actually seeks funding for bridge repair, and it's been very limited in the past. And actually, you know, a community's lucky if they get one bridge fixed. We're going to get the bridge over Thread Creek fixed on Belsey Road. But it may mean they're still studying the issue, but it may, I'm not sure the time frame yet, but they're looking at whether to shut the entire bridge down or be down to one lane. The other bridge that would affect, it's not within the township, but it would affect traffic flow from our township, and that's on Blanc Road in Mundy Township, close to US 23. There's a bridge there that actually, I think in the last year, had to shut down for a while because of repairs that need to be made, the emergency repairs. But that bridge is going to be either replaced or rebuilt or fixed, but it's going to be shut down for a period of time as well. And as we find out what the time frame is on that, we'll definitely want to let our residents know on both of those. Also, the road commission actually increased. You know, one of the things that you know we're looking at is actually in 2018 our match that we had to make was $65,000. So the road commission actually put forward $65,000, and we had to match that for them to pave local roads. Last year they had an increase, but it's gone from $65,000 in 2018 to in 2020 it's going to be basically $195,000 that we're going to have to match. So you're seeing that in the budget too, that it's a considerable increase. It obviously isn't nearly enough, but you know, we're looking at close to $400,000 going, you know, an increase from $120,000. So great, we're going in the right direction with the state money that the county is getting, and the county actually received some feedback, you know, that from a couple of townships that, you know, hey, by increasing this, you're costing the township more money. And in my mind, it does, you know, cause us to have to raise more matching funds. But I guess if somebody doesn't want to use it, that's up to them. But I like the idea that we're going to use every cent of it. We had the Aldi grand opening today, and I know Mr. Mansur was able to be there, and it's quite an event. I never have seen that many people lined up for a store opening, but I think there must have been, I don't know, 500 people.
All the way down to Kohl's. It was
all the way down to
crazy.
Kohl's. They were there supposedly from 3 o'clock in the morning. So
crazy.
Wendy in the mirror.
So kind of crazy that, but hey, that's great. we've got the tree lighting event coming up December 7th.
So
And I wanted to let, I don't know,
Trustee-
Mr. Atkins talk about an idea he had that I think that is fabulous.
Brilliant idea.
All right, so was thinking, throughout the year we talk about, accomplishments and things going on in the township, but we really spoon feed that information out in packets. But, if you think about collectively through the year, what did the township accomplish, what did we accomplish, and what did each one of our departments accomplish for the township? So the thought was maybe take like a top 5 from each department of some success stories. I think it's real powerful to have a sign or a big display board from each department that shows, hey, here's the top 5 things that happened this year, whether it's 20 new businesses, we repaved a few roads, or a combination of what really happened this calendar year and where the township is going. So I propose, I made a couple calls and started to put together some thoughts on timing. If the board thought this was a good idea to have this in place for this year's event, we would really need to have like each department's top 5 by say the middle of next week. And then we would need to kick off some signage by like the end of next week.
Where would you put this?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So the thought would be inside the pavilion where we gather for the event.
The tree lighting.
For the tree lighting event on the 7th of December at Bicentennial. Sorry, I should have been more specific on that.
But there's several other events after that we could even use them for as well.
Yeah, I mean, the boards could, and the signs could be taken around and shared wherever.
So,
Go ahead, Mr.
so kind of building on that a little bit, we'd have to have certain accomplishments submitted, and then maybe a small subcommittee here could kind of make sure, fine tune them so the message is right. And then maybe not only have the top 5 for 19, but maybe a couple forward looking things that they were going to accomplish in the next year to kind of give everyone a, here's what we did in 19 and what we're looking for calendar year 20. But this should all be part of a bigger package where every year we ought to be gathering up all the accomplishments by department, and then it'll just make this process a little easier. But this is just a good way, I think, to communicate to our residents, all the work that we, really that we've accomplished, and really kind of put a capstone on things that people are seeing around the township.
And you're right, we kind of dribble this information out from board meeting to board meeting, but there's really no state of the township kind of address that we go through. I mean, most people don't realize that we added about 120 million in taxable value in the past year.
Yeah.
They don't realize that our police department was accredited. What have you, Mr. Thomas?
What's the dollar amount?
For what?
For the signage for the holiday tree lighting.
Oh, could I?
Yeah, go ahead.
You want me to come? So, just to do some, preliminary, basically just to vet it out, see if it was plausible to even have this in place by the ceremony in December 7th. I called Craney Signs, and roughly $300 to $500 per sign. So you're talking within a couple $1,000 you could do 5 signs, and they also offered up they have a digital sign as well that we can upload graphics and stuff into. That doesn't get much use for the months of November, December, or January. That they could also make that part of the signage package, so you could do some stuff with that too. So
Can photos go on that digital? Is
Yes.
it the type that would
Yes.
have photos? So
He
we
said
could
they
have
could.
photos of Magna and other developments that we've had.
I would be, but I'd be remiss if Mr. Atkins didn't make the motion right now so we all can vote
Well,
on it.
I want to have it taken out of the police budget.
Absolutely.
There's a line item.
Fire budget.
Community.
I gotta say, it can't come out of capital, but.
No, fire budget.
Well, in the interest of time, Scott,
Yes.
sorry,
Mr. Atkins.
in the interest of time, because we are in a little bit of a crunch, I don't have the wording exact, but I would like to make a motion to get this moving along.
Yeah, actually, the board does have a budget, and for things, you know, that we
Special,
want to do
yeah,
ourselves.
projects.
Joe,
And
would you
we
be-
have, I believe, about $7,000 in there that has been unspent, but why don't we just we can make a motion to move forward, and we'll figure out where to get the money.
Before we
I
do
know I'm
this, can
adding
we
it,
ask
Joe.
Can we ask Trustee Massey to acquiesce?
What?
Can we ask you to acquiesce and let us make this motion?
Even though it's not on the agenda.
I know it's not on the agenda.
Yes, you can, but I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Massey.
Mr. Trustee Lonnie, have you spoken to Megan about this?
No, I haven't spoken to her. I told him that I would talk to the department heads tomorrow.
Who cares?
I just have a concern because she's been the leading person on the lighting.
Actually, I had a conversation with Mr. Limita about it, and he thought it was an excellent idea.
Okay.
You know, this is an operation.
So I would support Trustee Atkins' motion to provide the signage for the holiday event, which we can reuse later on.
Okay, so there's been a motion in support.
Is this an operation?
Well, and then just to add to it, just some clarity, would that be, Scott, would that be you gathering it from the department heads and then
And then
we,
passing it on to you guys to go through it, I think, and then we look at
you know,
it
we're
as
on
a board.
a
Yep.
time crunch to get this
Yep,
in
right,
place?
absolutely.
That's good. And maybe if you didn't.
So I think maybe we say up to what, $3,000, $3,500, just to leave some room and.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Sure.
so $3,500.
I'd agree to that.
Okay,
Support that.
motion to include up to $3,500.
Aye?
Yes. Yes.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we.
With that,
oh, that's
Mr.
your-
Laddie.
Do we need an executive
Well,
session?
does anybody see the need for an executive session this evening?
Well, he might.
I'm just asking if the board, I haven't asked Mr. Laddie yet, but does
I'm
any of the
sure
board
would
like?
like to be curious.
Yeah, I think, again, based on a written opinion that I had forwarded to the board, I think we should have a brief
Okay.
executive session.
All right.
So move, Mr. Chair, that we go into an
Support.
executive session to discuss
So we get a meeting after the meeting.
written legal opinion.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, and roll
Okay.
call.
Go ahead then.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
No, I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry. What was
Mr. Guzak,
Yes.
myself, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, yeah. We will spoon feed Paula.
Sure.